Imagine two mutual funds. Both delivered a 12% return last year. Which one is the better investment? You might think they're equal, but you'd be wrong. One of these funds took enormous risks to earn that 12%, while the other was remarkably stable. Returns alone don't tell the full story. You need to measure risk-adjusted returns. Looking only at raw returns is one of the biggest mistakes investors make. A fund that returned 15% sounds great, until you realize it swung between -30 and +60% along the way. This is where volatility comes in. Volatility measures how much returns fluctuate over time. The wider the distribution of returns, the higher the risk. Two funds can have the same average return but very different risk profiles. So how do we properly compare investments that have different levels of risk? Enter the Sharpe Ratio, created by Nobel laureate William Sharpe in 1966. The formula is elegant. Take the portfolio's return, subtract the risk-free rate. That's what you could earn with zero risk, like a treasury bill. Then divide by the standard deviation of the portfolio's returns. That's it. The numerator is your excess return, the reward you get above and beyond the safe option. The denominator is your risk. So the Sharpe ratio is literally reward divided by risk. Let's work through an example. Fund Alpha returned 15%. The risk-free rate is 4%. Its standard deviation was 20%. That gives us 15 minus 4 divided by 20, which equals 0. 55. Now Fund Beta returned only 10%, but with a standard deviation of just 8%. That's 10 minus 4 divided by 8, which equals 0. 75. Fund Beta actually delivered better risk-adjusted returns despite lower raw returns. Let's visualize this more broadly. Here's a scatter plot of multiple funds. Each dot represents a fund, with risk on the horizontal axis and return on the vertical axis. The Sharpe ratio is the slope of the line from the risk-free rate to each fund. Funds with steeper slopes, higher Sharpe ratios, deliver more return per unit of risk. Notice how the best funds aren't necessarily the ones with the highest returns. They're the ones with the steepest slopes. So what does a good Sharpe ratio look like? Below 0. 5 is considered poor. You're not being compensated enough for the risk. Between 0, 5, and 1 is acceptable. Above 1 is good. You're earning solid returns relative to risk. And above 2 is excellent. That's hedge fund territory. For context, the S&P 500 has historically delivered a Sharpe ratio of about 0.5 to 0.7. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has averaged around 0.76 over its lifetime. But the Sharpe ratio has important limitations. First, it assumes returns follow a normal distribution, that bell curve shape. In reality, financial returns have fat tails. Extreme events happen far more often than the bell curve predicts. Second, the time period you choose matters enormously. A fund might look brilliant over 3 years, but terrible over 10. And the Sharpe ratio penalizes upside volatility just as much as downside. But investors only really care about losing money. That last point led to the creation of the Sortino ratio. Instead of dividing by total standard deviation, the Sortino ratio divides only by downside deviation, the volatility of negative returns. This makes it a better measure when returns are asymmetric. In practice, professional investors use the Sharpe ratio to compare funds within the same category, evaluate portfolio changes before implementing them, and set expectations for risk-adjusted performance. The key takeaway: never judge an investment by its return alone. Always ask, how much risk did it take to get there? The Sharpe ratio gives you that answer in a single number. Higher is better, and now you know exactly what it means. Remember, a great return with massive risk is not a great investment. The Sharpe ratio helps you see through the noise and find truly superior performance. Use it wisely.